Happy Wednesday, folks. It's July the 22nd. I'm meteorologist Tim Pandages, and this is Hurricane Hub Live. Let's get right to it. Tropical Storm Bertha did make landfall today in Louisiana as a low-grade tropical storm. That'll continue moving along the pretty much the coastal section of the Gulf Coast, the Gulf Coast states. And out in the eastern Pacific, we've got remaining active with Fausto, hurricane. First hurricane of the season out there. And one other area of interest that's got a high likelihood of becoming the next named storm, the seventh named storm, which would be Genevieve. Let's start in the Atlantic here in the Gulf. We got Tropical Storm Bertha, 45-mile-per-hour winds. Remember yesterday it was stronger, 60-mile-per-hour winds, but it is still heavily sheared from the north. We've got winds out of the north to northeast that have been displacing all of the convection. You see the bubbling up here well off to the south and west of the center. That's how tilted it is. It's blowing off the tops of the storm system here, tilting it, so it's not able to strengthen and ventilate properly. You're looking at infrared satellite imagery here, and this tells us the temperature of the cloud tops. And we're seeing some pretty robust convection here. These cold cloud tops indicated by the shades of white showing up there. Very tall thunderstorm activity, but again, thankfully, it's well offshore, and we're not seeing much in the way at all of wind or rain in land areas, in populated areas. The problem with this system has been its storm track, meaning there's been onshore winds, persistent onshore winds, even though they're not very strong, it's been persistent, and that did lead to some storm surge. And of course, New Orleans is below sea level, so even a fetch off the coast there for a day or two will bring in some significant storm surge, and that's what they've been dealing with out there. But again, it is over land now, moving due west at 7 miles an hour, rather slow. But again, freshwater flooding from rainfall, not really an issue at all with the system. What's been interesting, though, is that you've got the influence of a tropical system here, and almost the entire state of Louisiana is under excessive heat warnings with heat indices up to 115. So hot, very humid, tropical air mass, and it's fitting that there's a tropical system rolling on through. I want to switch things up, and you can really kind of see how the low-level circulation, the bones of the system have been exposed. Pretty much the entirety of its existence so far with that ongoing shear with our ridge of high pressure parked pretty much due north, driving those winds out of the north to northeast. You've got the center of Bertha that made landfall around 2 o'clock local time in St. Bernard's Parish in Louisiana, and it's pretty much tracking due west right over New Orleans, like Pontchartrain there, and will eventually be pushing farther off to the west. But you can just see the low-level circulation here. We've got some convective showers building up inland on that onshore flow, but that's been about it. Nothing widespread, nothing heavy or persistent. But again, the onshore winds here coming up and banking up against the contour of this coastline here is driving up the surge levels, and they're still expecting 1 to 2 foot storm surge in the short term here before it builds farther off to the west. Here's that shear coming in again out of the north, even northeast. This is in the upper levels. That's displacing all the convection off to the southwest of the center. Still got tropical storm warnings up for Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. And then over into southeast Texas, we got tropical storm watches up into Galveston Bay. Expected to see even some storm surge levels reach into the bay there over the next 24 to 48 hours. But only about another day and a half this thing will be around before it moves inland into central Texas and just rains itself out, and just the circulation falls apart as it's away from its fuel source, which would be the warmer waters of the Gulf. But here's the expected storm surge. Up to 3 feet. Remember yesterday we were expecting up to 4 in this area here. I think the storm surge threat's really dropping off to the east. Still probably an issue, 1 to 2 feet maybe as you get farther to the west there. Here's how modeling sees things. Got the center of Bertha tracking again west of New Orleans and pretty much on a due westward track. The low-level center may actually pass right over Houston or Galveston Bay here by Thursday midday. And all the rain, notice all the unsettled weather is really dislocated well to the south, and a lot of that will build in a Corpus Christi and areas north of Brownsville, bringing some rain there. Now, we talked about this yesterday. I still find it very interesting. The last instances of Bertha, of course, we reuse the storm names. It's on a 6-year cycle. So these are the past times that Bertha has been used. It's never been retired, obviously. It's still around. And there's been a couple instances where Bertha became a major hurricane, Category 3 twice. And there was one storm system that moved up and over the mid-Atlantic coast, made landfall in North Carolina, moved up along the spine of the coastal plain here out in the Tidewater, and then up along I-95 into New England. At its peak, it was a Cat 3, and this was back in 1996. Caused a good amount of damage up through the mid-Atlantic. And back in 2002, which we'll get a better look at here, 2002 was a kind of a similar track to Bertha this go round. Here's the forecast track of Bertha 2026, due west. In 2002, it moved up and over New Orleans. It only was a tropical storm as well, and then kind of moved north and then southwest and then back over water before making a second landfall near Corpus Christi. And as we talked about yesterday, this storm system reminded me a lot of Hurricane Barry back in 2019 that developed in the same general area of the northeastern Gulf, tracked pretty much due west and then had a northwest trend as it topped out as a Category 1 hurricane, 75-mile-per-hour winds before making landfall well west of New Orleans. So it's very interesting here. You notice this section, this is where all three of those tracks are going to intersect. And this is due west, probably maybe 30, 40 miles west of New Orleans there. So found that interesting. Arthur done, Bertha still there, but done in a couple days. Maxed out as a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Next up would be Cristobal or Dolly. And I'll tell you what, there's nothing really on the horizon happening anytime soon. CPC put out their Climate Prediction Center put out their 2 to 3 week outlook. So let's jump out 2 weeks. July 29th, wrapping up July, heading into August, and we've got no activity expected out in the Atlantic Basin. Eastern Pacific, even that's quieting down, looks to be a little bit by this point in time. We see low possibility of development here. And then jumping out to the 3rd week, August 5th through August 11th, still nothing out in the Atlantic Basin and still pointing to low-end development odds out in the Eastern Pacific. Now, still a lot of dust out there, and the main development region has remained shut down. We haven't even had any areas to watch out there. If you remember, about a week and a half ago, there was a African easterly wave that emerged off the coast there and had a 10% chance on it for about 24 hours. And then it moved into a very stable environment, dust-filled environment, and fell apart. And look at this. As we go out to August 1st, looks like another huge plume of Saharan dust, although at this point in time, it is a little bit higher latitude. There's the Cabo Verde Islands moving pretty much due north of there. So our development region to the south, if something was to start brewing, probably wouldn't be all that affected. It can scoot right in under that plume of dust and possibly develop, but there's just no signal of that happening. Plenty of warm water under the hood there as well. Warm water anomalies through the main development region. Subtropics are very, very warm. We've got a few colder anomalies out into the Caribbean, but the Gulf pretty much for the most part is well above normal. Not the warmest we've ever seen it, although there are some indications here down through the Keys that those waters are cooking up into the mid-90s, some of those sea surface temperatures there. But elsewhere throughout the Gulf, pretty much a little bit above normal for this time of the year. You have to get over to the Eastern Pacific to see widespread, very warm anomalies, including our El Nino signal here that's just going to intensify as we go through the remainder of the season. All right, we're going to go for a quick break. We're going to listen in on a press conference out in Louisiana in regard to Tropical Storm Bertha, and then we'll take a look at the Pacific after that. Welcome back to Hurricane Hub Live. With Tropical Storm Bertha making landfall near New Orleans, Louisiana, they spent days preparing for the storm's impacts. Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry spoke earlier today about those preparations. Let's take a listen.
Over the last several days, our state has been preparing for Tropical Storm Bertha, and we have taken the storm seriously from the beginning. And that's what we all should do every time a storm system threatens our state. And the good news is that the storm is likely not to produce the type of rainfall or wind event that it could have. But I want to remind everyone of something important, that forecasts can change, and even a weaker storm can produce dangerous rainfall, localized flooding, and hazardous travel conditions. Now this brings me to the city of New Orleans. We have been working closely since Sunday with the state and local partners to make sure that the city was prepared. It was one of the things that I spoke to General Malfus on Sunday morning about, and we have been working very closely with the Sewage and Water Board. CIPRA has been working with our levee authorities to make sure that had this storm turned out to be a much greater threat or produced more heavier rainfall, that we were ready. And so since Sunday, we have seen the Sewage and Water Board take a number of steps in order to prepare for what could have been a worst-case scenario. As of today, GOSEP has supplied 30,000 sandbags to Orleans Parish. Over 90% of the major drainage pumps are available and ready for operation. Flood forecasting teams were actively monitoring the conditions and running storm models. Floodgates remain in their normal operating positions. All of the Army Corps of Engineers pumps are currently in service, and emergency backup generators that would provide 25 hertz power were available right now if it's needed. All of the underpass pumps are in service, or there are standby pumps available for those underpass pumping stations that were down. And again, let me make sure you understand. Sunday, I instructed General Malfus to contact all of our levee boards and the Sewage and Water Board and said, okay, we want to report on what is up and what may be down. And within 24 hours, they were able to get back to us with that. I want to also say thank you again, congratulate the Sewage and Water Board for what I think is a great dry fire exercise. Again, this could have been worse than it seems is going to be the case, but they were willing to man all of the pumps, to physically man those pumps, had this storm turned out to be a lot worse than it seems it's going to be. And you know what? That's exactly how government should operate. Preparing for a storm before the storm gets there and not having to react once danger basically is upon us, or the worst case scenario comes to pass. And, you know, this is something that I expect every level of government to stay focused on, and that's its core responsibility of protecting people and maintaining the critical infrastructure that protects our communities, and to be ready to respond if conditions change. As Bertha moves through Louisiana, our commitment remains the same and simple, that we will continue working alongside our local leaders, emergency responders, and communities across the state to keep Louisiana safe. Again, remember that being prepared for a storm first starts with you, the citizen. And so again, we want to remind you, we continually urge you to go to our website at getagameplan.org or download the app on your smartphone so that, again, you can go through that checklist, because we're, I don't know, what are we, Jay, about a quarter of a way through hurricane season, right?
Yes.
Huh? Not 50%, huh?
No, not even close.
No, not even close, right? So this is a good time for people to recognize that what could have been the worst case scenario, just because it's the best case scenario, that you should be prepared. So again, if you hadn't downloaded the app, we again encourage you to download the getagameplan.org app And with that, I will pass it on to Jay to give us the latest on the storm.
Well, thank you, Governor. Thank you, General, as well. And Governor, I would say that we've had 2 preseason games. We're still not into the heart of the season here. So with Bertha, good news, as the governor pointed out. By the way, for those of you who may not be aware, Bertha did make landfall just a few minutes ago, a little bit further north than we expected, up into St. Bernard Parish rather than Plaquemines Parish. But the good news here is that the dry air continue to do their work. Bertha will weaken steadily as it moves inland. The dry air, that wind shear, and the interaction with land is going to take most of the punch out of the storm. So you really don't expect to see tropical storm force winds to extend very far into the state before those begin to subside. Yes, it is going to get breezy, even downright windy in metro New Orleans, but it's not going to be very problematic. Rains, pockets of heavy rain certainly going to be possible, not only today, but through Thursday on the backside of the system as it pushes to the west. But again, not anticipating anything too problematic. Pockets of flooding will be possible, particularly in those places that routinely flood. And we're going to keep our eyes on the potential for some coastal flooding, a little bit of storm surge there. But in most cases, the surge is going to be 3 feet or less. That's manageable for those coastal communities. They see that on a not frequent basis, but frequently enough to be prepared for it. With a little bit of luck, this really is going to be an in and out kind of situation. But as the governor points out, don't let your guard down yet. We've still got to wait for the backside of the circulation, those rain bands that currently are as far east as the Florida Panhandle. We've got to wait for those to come through before we can fully exhale. But the way things look right now, with the main energy of the storm about 120 to 150 miles southwest of the main circulation moving into St. Bernard Parish, that is a very good setup for us in terms of minimal impacts from this tropical storm.
All right, stick around. We're going to get a check on the Eastern Pacific after a quick break. All right, welcome back. Let's get a check on the Eastern Pacific. We've got some activity out there. Of course, Fausto is a Category 1 hurricane, first hurricane of the Eastern Pacific season. And then right on its heels, likely it'll become Genevieve. We're up to high chances of that developing now over the next week or so, probably much sooner than that. And then well off to the west, we've got another area in the Central Pacific that's highly likely to develop out there as well. So development odds have increased since we last spoke yesterday. We're up to 50-50 odds over the next 48 hours. It's a big jump from 0% that we were looking at yesterday, and 90% odds of becoming Genevieve within the next 7 days. This is a very fertile part of the basin. This gave birth to Alita, Fausto, and now likely to be Genevieve here in the next couple of days. Again, that's the next name on the list. That'll complete our first column with 7 names down so far with 1 hurricane on the board. Next up would be Herman, Iselle, Julio, and maybe Karina. All right, here's a look at Fausto. 80-mile-per-hour winds, slightly stronger than yesterday, but still a Category 1 storm on the Saffir-Simpson scale. It goes 74 to 95, so we're well within that Category 1 range. And not much more intensification is really expected here. It's a large storm on satellite imagery here, and you switch it up and show you visible. It's a very aesthetically pleasing storm out there in the middle of the Atlantic, middle of the Pacific, not affecting anybody, but you can tell that there is a little bit of some dry air lurking off to the west of this system. And as we switch things up to the water vapor imagery, anything that's a rust color and the shades of orange and red, that's some dry air in the mid-levels, and sometimes this can get pulled into the general circulation of a tropical system. But for now, it's pretty well walled off from getting entrained into that system for now. But that could be a possibility here as it is working west at 12 miles an hour and heading into that dry air. Here's the forecast from the National Hurricane Center, pretty much due west for the next several days. And then there's Hawaii. Here we are by Monday afternoon. High-end tropical storm, so it's on a slow weakening trend over this time. 70-mile-per-hour winds. I did look at the longer-range models here, and it does take a remnant circulation because it's going to weaken significantly after that. Probably still a tropical storm, though, to the north of the Hawaiian Islands by the time we get to the middle of next week or so. So our season scorecard remains unchanged from yesterday. 2 named storms out in the Atlantic. We had Arthur and, of course, Bertha. And then 6 in the Eastern Pacific with 1 Hurricane Fausto out there right now. By tomorrow, maybe we'll have Genevieve, and we'll up that to 7. All right, coming up after a quick break, we'll have tropical trivia and also some tropical tidbits. Welcome back. When talking about hurricanes and tropical systems, categories are important, but why is that? How is that even determined? Let's dive into it. Hurricanes are categorized by their maximum sustained winds using the Saffir-Simpson scale of measurement, with ranges from Category 1 all the way up to Category 5. Tropical systems reach the title of hurricane when their maximum sustained winds surpass 74 miles per hour. At this level, a hurricane is a lower grade Category 1. Maximum winds within a Category 1 storm range from 75 miles per hour to 95 miles per hour. Typically, Category 1 storms can cause some damage. Now, from 96 to 110 miles per hour is a Category 2 hurricane. Extensive damage can occur with an impact from one of these storms. From 111 to 129 miles per hour, we are now at a Category 3 major hurricane. Devastating damage is expected from these. It only gets more intense from here. 130 to 156 miles per hour is a major Category 4 hurricane. These disastrous storms can bring catastrophic damage. If maximum sustained winds are measured above 157 miles per hour, then we get in the range of the Saffir-Simpson scale of a major Category 5 hurricane. As you can imagine, with winds that strong, the damage would be catastrophic. All right, it's time for Tropical Trivia. The question I posed to you yesterday was I drew a comparison between Bertha and another storm from 2019. I did it again today. Which storm was it? It was Tropical Storm Hurricane Barry that made landfall in 2019. All right, today's question is Hurricane Michael made landfall as a Category 5 in 2019 as well. In what state? Was it Texas, Florida, Louisiana, or along the East Coast in North Carolina? I'll have the answer for you tomorrow night on Hurricane Hub Live. Remember, scan the QR code to download the 13 News Now Hurricane Guide. It's got information on supplies you should have on hand and emergency numbers you should also have with you if you need them, and a whole lot more. Again, we're here Monday through Friday, weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you back here on Thursday.